Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of Digital Fate. I'm Richie, this is 𝐏𝐀𝐑𝐓, and we had a massive mega leak from Modern Horizons 3 over the weekend. It's so big, I'm gonna have to take a couple videos to get all of this out to you, but I wanted to make sure and get this first half out to you as quick as possible. So splitting it in two videos, this is the first one, the second one is on the way. Before we dive into the cards really quick, I would just like to ask you to like the video if you wouldn't mind, because everyone that likes this really helps it get out to so many more people. And it's all of you guys that have been with me liking the video every single day that have helped this channel to grow so quickly. So if that's you, thank you so much for liking the videos. If that's not you, please do me a favor and just hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds and it helps immensely. Also, if you're new, subscribe so you never miss an upload. Tons of spoiler content on the way. Tons of really cool Thunder Junction deck lists, deck texts. So look forward to that stuff. With all of that out of the way, let's get to the cards. So we're starting off here with Perilous Landscape. This is a land that taps for a colorless mana. It does not enter the battlefield tapped. You can sacrifice it to search your library for a basic island, mountain, or plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And it also has cycling for 3 mana in the colors of Jeskai. So this land kind of does it all. It does so much. The fact that it can generate you mana and come into play untapped is huge, because if you're playing like a landfall deck or something like that, and you know, you don't want to really search for your land yet, you want to wait until you get your landfall payoffs in play, you can make sure you don't miss your land drop, that you're not behind as far as your mana. You can play stuff out and then, you know, drop that Scoot Swarm or whatever and then finally sack it. So this cycle of lands is going to be really, really cool for stuff like that. And also, the fact that it's a common is pretty crazy. Pauper's going to absolutely love this card. Control is going to be all over the place in Pauper, specifically because of this cycle, I think. There's just so much versatility here. Being able to fix you in 3 colors, being able to cycle to draw cards later in the game, it's just so much. But we're moving on to 𝐏𝑒𝐻𝑒's Invocation. Excuse me. I believe this one is a reprint. 1 blue and 2 for an enchantment. Let me know in the comments below if I'm right about that. You may have 𝐏𝑒𝐻𝑒's Invocation enter the battlefield as a copy of an enchantment you control, except it has, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile this enchantment. If you do, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So, not only is this a copy enchantment, but it's a copy enchantment that can flicker itself during your upkeep to then become a copy of a different enchantment, which is kind of wild. You can still get your upkeep trigger. You can order it so that this exiles after your upkeep triggers on the stack. So if you copy an enchantment like a Phyrexian Arena or something like that, have an upkeep trigger to draw a card, you can still draw your card, flicker this, have it come back into play as something else. You can copy sagas, and then before it goes away to chapter 3 on the saga, you can, you know, flicker it and have it come back into play as something else. So much versatility in this card. Very, very cool. But moving on, we've got Detective's Phoenix. 1 red and 2 for a 2/2 enchantment creature Phoenix. It has Bestow for 1 red and Collect Evidence 6. So we are seeing some of that Murders at Karlov Manor mechanics come over to Modern Horizons here. So Bestow means you can pay this Bestow cost, pay 1 red, and exile cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard in order to basically bring this back. So it also has Flying and Haste. It's a 2/2 Flying Haste for 3 mana. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has Flying and Haste. And you may cast Detective's Phoenix from your graveyard using its Bestow ability. So 3 mana, comes down as a 2/2 flyer, swings in right away, and then after it dies, it can come back as an aura on whatever you want, giving it +2/+2 Flying and Haste if you can pay that Bestow cost. So pretty interesting mix of Bestow and Collect Evidence here. I don't know how good this card ends up being. I don't know if it ends up being too slow, but I think if there are decks out there that do fill up their graveyard really quick, being able to bring this back for just 1 mana and get that big of a buff, you know, if you don't have to jump through too many hoops to collect the Evidence 6, does seem kind of crazy. So this could be a real winner, but I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments what deck you think it would go in and if you think it's good enough. Next up, we've got Tune the Narrative. Now, this is just a common, but I think it's a pretty damn good one. 1 blue for an instant, you draw a card, and you get 2 energy. Very simple, so it's kind of like an opt, except you don't get the scry, but you get 2 energy. And if you guys have been paying attention to the spoilers for this set so far, there are tons of cards that utilize energy to great effect. So being able to get 2 free energy to boost up the rest of the cards in your deck seems pretty wild, on top of just a 1 mana instant speed cantrip. So I don't know, seems really good as an instant. Next up, we've got Cursed Mirror. I also believe this is a reprint. Maybe it was in a Commander set, and now it's actually Modern legal. I'm not sure, let me know in the comments. But this is 1 red and 2 for an artifact. It's basically a mana rock. It can tap for 1 red. The difference here is when it enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. So when it first comes down, it copies your best creature, has haste, swings in, gets the value, maybe gets ETB triggers off of whatever it copies, and then every turn after that, it's just a mana rock. Having a free copy of your best creature swinging in the turn you play your mana rock, to not waste the tempo and the board state and the board presence, seems really good to me. So I don't know where this card wants to live, but I kind of love it. Also, it's worth noting that if you flicker it, you can make it come back into play as whatever creature you want. If you find a way to just flicker it every turn, you can keep having an extra copy of your best creature swinging in with haste every single turn, which is kind of crazy. So, pretty cool card. Next up, we have Amphibian Downpour. This is an enchantment aura for 1 blue and 2. It has Flash and Storm. It enchants a creature. An enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a blue frog creature with base power and toughness 1/1. So what's cool about this is, sure, you can play it in your Storm deck, right? And when you storm off, you can turn the entire board into 1/1s. But it also has Flash, which means you can do it at instant speed in the middle of combat. So you can be attacking in, or maybe on the blocks when someone else is trying to alpha strike you, and then you can just flash this in and potentially turn a whole bunch of their things into 1/1s and blow them out, kill their stuff, your stuff survives. But what's cool about this is whether or not you're truly abusing it with Storm in Storm style decks, just as early removal in the early game, it's cool that it doubles as this thing that's like, oh, like your opponent's putting a lot of pressure on you and you just need to stall them to get to your pieces. This can just act as removal. So it's a cool, like, sort of pseudo combo piece in the mid game that acts as somewhat of an on-curve removal option in the early game. So having, you know, both of those options available to you, I think helps the versatility of this card be really good. And remember, it always has Flash no matter what. So even if you don't storm off, you just cast this, you know, just as the removal, you can still do it in the middle of combat. You can still blow them out and kill their best creature, and not lose yours, you know, stuff like that. So I think this card is pretty versatile and really interesting. Next up, we've got Roshin, Roaring Prophet. This is a 4/4 legendary giant shaman in the colors of Gruul for 4 mana. When Roshin, Roaring Prophet enters the battlefield, you mill 6 cards, and you may put a card with X in its mana cost from among them into your hand. So this is sort of like an X spell lord in a way. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 6 cards, you get your best X spell, right? Put it into your hand. So it's automatic card advantage there, and then you can tap him and reveal any number of cards in your hand with X in their mana cost, and you get to add 2 colorless Hedron mana for each card revealed this way. Spend this mana only on costs that contain X. So if you're super deep into X spells, this can generate you a ton of mana to actually pay for one of those X spells as well. The only downside here is you really want to be deep into X spells, right? Because the more X spells you have in your hand, the more mana you can get for one of your X spells. So it sort of exponentially increases the value of this guy. But even in a deck where, you know, you have a decent amount of X spells, even if you're not super deep into them, I could see Roshin being good enough just because of the fact that it replaces itself. You know, as long as on average you have 1 in every 6 cards being an X spell card, at the very least it replaces itself and gives you a little bit of mana to cast that X spell. So even in those situations, I think Roshin might be kind of cool. Is this a new commander? Will it see play as a commander? There might be a deck here. I'm not sure, but there might be. Let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Triton Wavebreaker. This is an uncommon. It's a 1/1 enchantment creature, Merfolk Wizard, for 1 blue mana. It has Bestow for 1 blue and 1, and as long as Triton Wavebreaker is a creature, it has Prowess. So it's actually a 1/1 Prowess for 1. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and Prowess. So it's worth noting here that this Bestow cost doesn't have Collect Evidence like the other one. So I think in the more common rarities, you're going to see, you know, Bestow and Collect Evidence and stuff like that showing up singularly. And then as you get into the rares, you're going to see some of those mechanics get combined in interesting ways, which is pretty cool. But even just a 1/1 Prowess for 1, it's going to be pretty good, especially for Limited, if you're playing this set in Limited. I know I'm excited to play this in Limited. It's finally going to be on Arena. I think this is the first time. I think it is the first time we've had a Modern Horizons set on Arena, right? Yeah, so I'm going to be drafting this on Arena, and it's going to be fun. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Being able to bring this back for 2 mana, put it on a different creature to buff that creature up and give that creature prowess, gives you some extra value into the late game, gives you some card advantage there, so pretty cool. It also counts as an enchantment, which is really nice. Certain decks are going to like that. Next up, we've got Power Balance. Speaking of enchantments, this is 2 red mana for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you do, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the 2 spells have the same mana value. This is an interesting card. Now, it obviously rewards playing cleverly with things like Brainstorm or Jace the Mind Sculptor, being able to set up the top of your deck, because if you're scared of them playing a certain card the next turn, you know, set up the top of your deck to be a card that's the same cost as that and kind of get ahead of them. Think 2 steps ahead, but it's very difficult to set that up. Another way to maybe take advantage of this is finding ways to tax your opponent's spell. If you can tax their spells on command, you could set yourself up for being able to cast whatever's on top, depending on, you know, how the game state changes and what they're casting and what ends up being on top. There could be ways to manipulate that. I'm not entirely sure if cards exist that can do that at instant speed, manipulate the cost of your opponent's stuff right before they cast it at instant speed. I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if there is, but I'm sure there's got to be ways for this to be at least pseudo broken. Being able to play things for free is pretty good, I hear, in Magic. I don't know. We'll see. Next up, we've got Brain Surge. This is another uncommon. 1 blue and 2 for an instant. You draw 4 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So this is basically a super Brainstorm, which is kind of interesting. Now, it does cost an extra 2 mana for only 1 extra card, but you get to keep 1 extra card, right? It's not just draw 4, put 3 on top. It's not just seeing 1 extra card deep as a Brainstorm. It's also keeping 1 extra card. So you look at 4, keep 2, instead of look at 3, keep 1. So looking at the extra card is worth something for sure, and then drawing the extra card is also worth something. So I don't know if this card is quite good enough. 3 mana is a lot for Modern, but it has a chance. You know, Brainstorm has been known to be a very, very good card in older formats. Granted, most of the reason for that is because it's 1 mana, but there are a lot of ways to manipulate the top of your deck or to get value off of manipulating the top of your deck. So this could slot into some of those tactics pretty decently well. At the very least, this is going to be a really good card in Limited, though. Moving on, we've got Imskir Iron Eater. This guy is 8 mana in the colors of Rakdos for a 5/5 legendary demon, but it has affinity for artifacts. That's right, affinity for artifacts has returned. Good God. When Imskir Iron Eater enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control, rounded down. You can also pay 1 red and 3, sack an artifact, deal damage equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value to any target. So this kind of does everything. Obviously in Modern, it's way easy to go super wide with artifacts, end up dropping this for only 2 mana. For that 2 mana, you get a 5/5 that can sack artifacts to deal damage, you know, to any target. You can kill creatures, you can kill planeswalkers, you can do it to your opponent's dome. That gets pretty wild. But then just getting to draw cards as well seems kind of busted. This guy just seems insane. 5/5 for 2 mana, draws you a bunch of cards. You lose some life, but then you have a sack outlet that does damage to whatever you want. It's just like the good parts of 3 different good cards just mashed together into one card. I don't know. This guy seems nuts. Can we have a Affinity for Artifacts commander deck? Can we use this guy as the commander and play a Rakdos artifact deck? That seems like it might be fun. I don't know if it's viable, but it seems really cool. This guy seems really powerful. Honestly, it just seems really powerful. Next up, we've got Emissary of Soulfire. This is another uncommon. This is a 1/4 Djinn Monk for 3 mana in the colors of Azorius. And when it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy. So even more, you know, doubling down on those energy mechanics. You can pay 2 energy to put an Exalted counter on target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So an Exalted counter means whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each instance of Exalted among other permanents you control. So you want to put the Exalted counter on the creature that's not swinging, so that you can get as much value as possible. But pretty cool here in that you have an energy payoff and an energy generator. You can, you know, flicker this guy to get more energy. You can get energy from some of the other cards that we were talking about earlier and that have already been spoiled over the last few weeks. Just a lot of versatility here. Energy's looking like it's going to be a pretty strong theme, at least for Limited. But man, it looks like there's some busted energy cards for Constructed as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that pop up. Next up, we've got Ripples of Undeath. 1 black and 1 for an enchantment. It's a rare. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you mill 3 cards. Then you can pay 1 mana and 3 life, and if you do, you put a card from among those cards into your hand. So it's sort of like a Phyrexian Arena, except it's cheaper, but it costs more mana and life, but you get card selection. I don't know how good this card is. Like, the card selection is really good. I think where this card wants to live the most is probably in a deck that wants to self-mill. Maybe in a Reanimator deck or a Dredge style deck or something like that, where milling 3 cards is part of the value that you get out of this. And the fact that you get to draw the best of those 3 cards is, you know, added value on top of the fact that you want to be milling 3 cards. So if a deck like that has room for this and needs card advantage, I think this could see play. This could be really cool. But if you're just drawing the card, I don't know if 3 life and a mana is worth it to draw the card, you know, to, you know, being more costly than something like Phyrexian Arena, but also getting the card selection. I think that by itself might not quite be good enough, although it is worth noting it's only 2 mana. So it is cheaper, it comes down quicker, it starts giving you cards sooner. So, interesting. Jury's still out on this one, but definitely in any kind of deck that wants to fill up its own graveyard, I think this would be considerable. Next up, we've got White Orchid Phantom. This is a 2 mana 2/2 flying first strike Spirit Knight. This guy's nuts, man. If you would have shown me this card back in the day when we had White Knight and Black Knight, I would have lost my mind. Like, having first strike and flying on the same creature for just 2 white mana seems pretty good in and of itself, but it's got an ETB ability as well. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So having non-basic land destruction just built into a really solid body to begin with seems kind of crazy, you know? And as formats get older, they're less and less likely to have basics. There's so many good non-basics to use. So this could really hurt the right deck. So card just seems really good. I kind of love it. We're going to move on, though, to Marionette Apprentice. This is 1 black and 1 for a 1/2 human artificer. It is an uncommon. It has Fabricate 1, which means when this creature enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Either or, not both. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. And that's the part that makes this kind of crazy. This is sort of like a Blood Artist turned up to 11. You don't gain the life like Blood Artist, but they lose life not only for creatures, but also for artifacts. In a deck that can go wide with artifacts that you want to sack, man, you could just make them lose so much life all at once. It could just be insane. The fact that you also get a 1/2 body, not a 0/1, and you can get a servo token as sacrifice fodder for the ability seems pretty nuts. I don't know. This seems like one of the better uncommons we've seen from the set. I have a feeling there is going to be a constructed deck that this is worth putting in. It just seems absolutely nuts, but let me know in the comments below. And now it's time for the coffee break. I don't have anything to talk about in the coffee break. I just really needed a coffee, so I went and got a coffee. Let's get back to the cards. Nectar of the Gods. But moving on, we've got 𝐏𝐀𝐑 Famed Mechanist. Mechanist. This is a 3/3 legendary dwarf artificer for 4 mana in the colors of Jeskai. It has Fabricate 1 as well, so you can have it come into play as a 4/4 modified creature, or a 3/3 and then have a 1/1 flying Thopter artifact creature token as well. Other non-token creatures you control also have Fabricate 1, which gets really crazy. That means every single creature that you play can potentially make a Thopter token when it enters the battlefield, or just come into play bigger, right? But then it also has this activated ability. You can pay 2 mana and tap it and choose one, either Populate or Proliferate. Populate increases the number of tokens you have on the battlefield for each token you have, and then Proliferate is going to increase all of the counters that you have by 1 on every single permanent that has a counter on it, which is also pretty crazy. So getting all of these abilities on just one card seems nuts. I don't know what's going on with the art for this guy. It looks kind of, but to each his own, I guess. Let me know how you feel about the art in the comments, because I feel like, I don't know, am I the only one that's not digging this alternate art style? But I digress. This card just seems bananas. 4 mana, all of your creatures get Fabricate 1. It has Fabricate 1 when it enters. It has a crazy activated ability that can either populate or proliferate. Like, it just seems like it does everything you want to do in the deck that wants something like this. It's probably good enough to be a commander for sure. I'm pretty sure this is in the commander subset, actually, which is pretty interesting, which means it won't actually be able to be used in modern. But regardless, I think this guy is pretty nuts. In Commander, there's absolutely decks that want to see him. Let me know what kind of deck you think this guy would fit in, because he just seems bananas. Next up, we've got Warren Soul Trader. 1 black and 2 for a 3/3. It's a zombie goblin wizard. You can pay a life and sacrifice another creature to create a treasure token. Now, what's crazy about this is you don't have to pay any mana at all, and you don't have to tap it at all. You just sack a creature. As long as you have enough life, you make a treasure token. This is almost like a build your own channel in a way. If you have enough creatures to sacrifice, you can just pay as much life as you want and generate that many treasures, and then use those treasures to generate whatever mana you need in the same way as a channel. You're just limited by how many creatures you have to sacrifice. So you could use it in a big brain combo deck maybe to fuel similar shenanigans to like Channel would always do, you know, to things that Channel would always do. But you can also just use this in a deck to protect your board state, and if they try to use removal on a creature, you can sack it in response, get a treasure token for your trouble, or just use it to ramp in a deck that's going wide with some tokens early, ramp to a huge threat in the mid game. Seems like it's very versatile and pretty insane. It's also like every creature type. Not literally, but I mean, it's a zombie, could work in zombie tribal. It's a goblin, it could work in goblin tribal. It's a wizard. I'm I'm not entirely sure where this wants to live, but I kind of love it. And the sky's the limit, honestly, for a card like this. It just seems crazy. You just need enough life and enough stuff to sack, and then you can pretty much do anything. But moving on, we've got Wrath of the Skies. This is 2 white and X mana for a sorcery. You get X energy, and then you may pay any amount of energy. You destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. So it's sort of a Wrath of God. It's sort of a Pernicious Deed. It just destroys everything. It's not limited to just creatures, which is pretty crazy. It hits artifacts. It hits enchantments. And what's cool too is you don't have to use up all of the energy. If you play this in a deck where you have tons of mana available and you make like 12 energy, you could still only use 5 energy and kill everything that's 5 or less. Maybe because you have a really nasty 6 mana planeswalker, or actually this doesn't even hit planeswalkers, so ignore that. But maybe you have a really nasty 6 mana creature on the battlefield that you don't want to die, but you want to take out all of your opponent's nasty things that cost 5 or less. You just pay the 5 energy, right? So the fact that this scales, it has versatility. In some ways it can be one-sided. It hits more than just creatures, and it generates you a bunch of energy that can be left over after destroying everything if you don't use it all. Just seems pretty crazy. And then the best part about this is if you are in an energy deck where you're generating lots of energy other ways throughout the game, you don't even have to pay a lot. Like, you could just pay 2 white mana and that's it, and generate no energy and use up the energy you already have to sweep the board. This could be a 2 mana Wrath that also hits artifacts and enchantments, and that just seems bananas to me. I don't know, am I the only one that thinks this is crazy? This might be my favorite card of the day. It just seems bonkers. We've seen so many good energy payoffs and so many good ways of generating energy in this set so far. Man, I really think energy is just going to be where it's at for this set. It just seems bananas. But now we're on to our last card of the day. This one is a mythic. This is Ashling Flame Dancer, a 4/4 legendary elemental shaman for 4 mana in 4 red mana. Sorry, 2 red mana and 2. I'm tired, guys. Give me a break. There's a lot of cards to go through. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end, but she also has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, discard a card and then draw a card, and if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, Ashling Flame Dancer deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. If it's the third time, you add 4 red mana. So this is kind of like Omnath in mono red, and we all know how well Omnath went over. This card just seems disgusting. The fact that you can save up all the red mana that you generate to have a turn that goes really big, later in the turn, just seems really crazy. If you're casting multiple spells, it's really easy for something like Izzet Spellslinger deck to just go off on cantrips, things like Opt, cheap removal, just really go off with spells. It's super easy to just Pyroclasm the board, generate a bunch of mana to go into even bigger spells, and also get a little card advantage off the first trigger. So I don't know, it just seems like a ton of value, and honestly, man, it's just, I'm getting flashbacks to Omnath and how crazy Omnath was when it came out. Granted, that was standard legal at the time, and this is modern legal, but regardless, seeing another version of Omnath just kind of gives me PTSD and gets me really scared. So I'm sure this card's going to be insanely abusable. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure exactly the best way to do that, but if you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments, because this card is cracked. This card is just insane, and it provides so much value in a color that it's very easy to get that value. So this card will absolutely be absurd, and I really want to know what deck it's actually going to go in. But that's it for today. There is another whole half of the Mega Leak, so I shouldn't really say that's it for today, right? That's it for this video. But there's a ton more cards I still have to go over, but I want to get this one out to you right now, and then I'll start getting to work on that next video. So this is Mega Leak Part 1. it is out of the way. Part 2 is on the way. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video. It helps so much. I really need the help getting this video out to so many more people, and every single like does help a ton. So if that's you, if you've been liking the videos, thank you. Thank you so much. If you're new here, subscribe so you never miss an upload. Tons of spoiler content. Tons of deck techs coming for Outlaws at Thunder Junction. Really excited about all the content that's coming on the channel. So definitely subscribe, like, do the thing. I'll see you guys next time. I'll be back with part 2. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.